Hey, welcome back to Sermon Notes. I'm Amy Jo Girardier, and we have...
My name is Garrett Gregory, and today we've got Senior Pastor of Brentwood Baptist Church, Mr. Mike Glenn.
Yay.
Doctor, Mr., all of the above.
Yeah, what's his name?
What's his name?
Yeah, that's right.
All of it.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming.
Yes.
Well, thanks for having me.
Out of the
excited.
gate yesterday, can we just do this? It was just too funny at the 11 o'clock when Travis dismissed the choir.
The choir.
Has that ever happened before?
No, usually they bring the choir back in 3 or 4 times and
Right.
and leave you like 5 minutes of preaching,
Yeah.
so that goes. But in Travis's defense,
He did a great job of
he
confessing.
had a volleyball game at 1 o'clock.
Okay.
He was ready to go.
He plays on a volleyball team. Tournament was at 1 o'clock. So by the time we got to 10:30, 11, Travis had checked out.
He was already
He was already playing volleyball.
set spike.
So the
He
fact
is the team setter, apparently.
yeah,
Oh,
so
wow.
that's what I understand.
Yeah.
So
I have a score update that
Oh,
I found
wow.
out this morning.
Oh, wow.
So with Travis on the team, Travis, if you're listening, they won in 3 sets yesterday, and then Trav had to come back for sound check for
Right.
the worship last night, and I can't remember the team name, but they lost.
Yeah.
So I think Trav probably thinks pretty highly of himself as the team MVP right now.
Wow. Did he
So-
dismiss anybody from the
That-
volleyball team?
That we don't know.
No.
But congrats to Trav and the
Yes.
team.
well, I'm
Good
just glad he
job.
didn't dismiss me and say,
thought
"Hey,
that was
I've
too
got to
funny.
go. Y'all need."
You're gone. You're
Yeah,
gone. Yeah.
So you still preached post that moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
It's a good thing. Well, if you could dismiss anybody from, I'm just teasing
yeah.
you.
Oh, I got a long list.
I'm sure.
Well, you've heard my line at funerals. All of us have a list of people that we would
We
give to Jesus
do.
if he wants to take somebody home.
That's right.
Here's my list.
Here's some people that the world would be a better place.
Why didn't you pick them?
Yeah.
Yeah.
If all the people you could have picked this past week, you didn't have to pick them. You
That's
could have-
right. That's right. Well, yesterday you mentioned a military term, sit rep.
Sit rep. Mhm.
Can you kind of flesh that out for us? What does that
Sit
mean?
rep is the process that a field commander will use to update a higher ranking officer who comes into the theater, whether the colonel's coming to check on the captain in the battle or whatever, and it's a really precise way of here's where we are, here's what we found. Here's where we are. Here's if we've got casualties, or here's what we're running up against, and here's our next plan. And it's usually less than a minute
Oh, wow.
that you can fully catch the incoming commander up on what's going on. Police now use it. If you call the shift commander in, then the officers on the scene will say, here's what we've got. We've had a wreck. We've got 2 injured. Ambulance is on the way.
Wow.
And that kind of stuff where now the new officer who will be in charge by his rank will be able to make whatever decisions need to make. But they'll have that information really quick. And it's a really kind of a neat kind of thing. And so
Yeah.
you'll see us officer come and go, sit rep. All right, here's where we are.
That's great. So when you're praying, talking to Jesus about Brentwood Baptist, what do you think that Jesus's sit rep for Brentwood Baptist would be?
It's that thing where it's the best of time, worst of times kind of thing. We are a very healthy congregation by all of the strategic numbers that we pay attention to. We have a strong team, strong staff. We are in the middle of a transition with me announcing my retirement at the end of the year. That's always kind of tricky in how you hand that off. And not everybody does it well. Things, Disney has had to, call their guy back twice or something because they did not do it well.
That's right.
And it's a notoriously bad moment for churches because churches usually will call somebody who is either different from
The current leader?
the current leader, or has a certain charisma, or we really like this guy kind of stuff, and not necessarily the gifts that the new situation will be calling for.
Yeah.
So it's a dangerous time right now for the church. Now we're thoughtful, we're prayerful. We've been really slow working through this process. People don't understand that we've been working on this process for 2 years.
Yeah.
When I started talking about, hey,
Yeah.
I love what I do and I love this church, but if you're paying attention, and if you do love the church, there comes a time when you're no longer the best guy to do what's next.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's a hard moment.
Yeah.
But it's a good moment. So it's been a good time. So I think, and you add that to the transition of the Brentwood community. All the folks that were here when I came have now retired to Spring Hill and Thompson Station and Florida.
Right.
A lot of my friends now, I have 5 or 6 phone calls a week to Florida because that's where my friends have ended up. Yeah. And now we've got all of these young families that are moving in who are 2 or 3 generations younger than me. And so we need somebody whose voice they recognize and that kind of stuff. So you have this whole turnover of all the communities around us. So
It's exciting too.
Yeah.
It's good.
You mentioned the term boldness throughout the text, and I think that's what the text lends itself to. Mm-hmm. While we're talking about the history of BBC, not to skip too far ahead, but when you look back, you've been here now
31 years. 32 in August.
32 August. When you look at the history of the church, the milestone moments from when you came, where have you seen maybe 2 or 3 instances of Brentwood as a church take on the boldness you saw with Peter and John?
Well, it's one time I was a guest speaker at the senior adult meeting and senior adult luncheon, and the leader of the senior adult luncheon pulled me aside and he said, "The natives are a little restless." I said, "Really?" He said, "Yeah." He said, because there was so much change going on so fast, and I said, "Okay." So and they were sitting in the circular tables like we have here, and I said, "Listen," I said, "we are the church that you taught us how to be." Mm-hmm. And so I walked table to table, and I picked one person at the table who did something crazy. We come from a long line of crazies. We have a guy who told the architects at Life, which was the Sunday school board at the time.
Yes,
they
sir.
always hired Baptist. They came out when we were building the very first building, and he told the architects, "Go fly a kite." Which was bold language in the early 70s,
Yeah. How dare you.
Yeah, because they wanted to build the architects saying you had to build a sanctuary. And our church was one of the first churches in America to build a gym before it built a sanctuary. Because you remember early 70s when our first building was built at 409 Franklin Road, there was no YMCA, there was no Brentwood High School. So there was literally no place for the young people to go. So we'd have worship in the sanctuary. We would take the chairs up. We'd skate. We'd play basketball. Okay, that was pretty radical. We called the pastor for the deaf when we had 8 deaf people in the church. And Betty Steersman is going, "We need to call a pastor." "You don't even have a Sunday school class yet, Betty. What are you talking about?" And all the work came that we're involved in the deaf community now came out of that movement.
Is it true? Did she start signing
Yeah.
for people before there was?
Oh, there
even
was no
deaf?
deaf people in the.
Yeah.
I used to tell her all the time. I said, "The only thing I got to do is tell the judge, we don't have any deaf people," and
right.
they would haul her off.
That's right.
It's just yeah.
Love that.
Kairos. There was no reason for Kairos to work. We were too far away from the demographic. Nothing seemed to work. But we had people driving. In fact, in its heyday, Kairos was so strong that it messed up our demographic studies. When we did our demographic studies, getting ready for Station Hill, the guy leading us through the process said, "I don't understand why you have this big chunk of people coming from Nashville, urban Nashville, up toward Belmont and all that."
Yes, sir.
And it was Kairos. Everybody else was south, and it was just not.
Yeah.
And there was no reason for Kairos to work, and Kairos worked.
That's good. Love that. Well, so what are some challenges then that maybe you can see for Brentwood Baptist that would require them to be bold? In fact, I know last night at the night of worship, I think it was as a result of yesterday's sermon, you were asking us to be bold, and last night, as we were taking in several prayer requests, that was a lot of people were saying, I pray that I would be bold.
Yeah. The difference now is the world won't tolerate casual Christianity. The world is now challenging what the church doesn't have the guts to do. Everybody knows that most people who say they are Christian don't live as Christians. The world is now saying, if you're going to say you follow Christ, we're going to demand a price.
Yeah.
Okay, so what is happening now is that if you're going to be a casual Christianity, the world's going to call you on that, and you'll either get serious about your faith or you will drop out of the faith. But if we are pro-life. Okay, how can we be pro-life in a state where 8,000 kids are in state custody? Okay, so that's why we're going to see the governor. That's why we're pushing the adoption and foster care stuff. There's no reason for a child who needs a home in the state of Tennessee not to have a home. So that kind of stuff. And interestingly enough, when you step boldly and consistently in your faith, the world will not necessarily agree with you, but they will respect you. And I think that's what the difference now is. The world is confronting us and saying, put up or shut up.
That's good.
And they're okay if we shut up.
Yeah. That's good.
Can you open the curtain a little bit on the conversations with the governor from last week? Can you tell us a little bit about what may have been talked about or plans, anything like that?
We have the chief of staff is a friend of mine for Governor Lee. Governor Lee is a very committed believer. And when all of that broke with the DCS and kids sleeping on the floor, and
Yes, sir.
I talked to Joe, who's chief of staff, and I said, listen, tell me how I can help the governor. Tell me what we can do. I said, but you need to know this is not going to stand. We're not going to be a church in Tennessee, as beautiful a state as we are, with the resources we have, and we have children sleep on the floor. That's not going to stand.
Yeah.
And so Joe got us a meeting with the governor, and it was there that we were able to tell the governor and Margie Quinn, who is the new commissioner of DCS, that we are committed to solving this problem. Now, not only solving that problem, but like I talked about yesterday, it's going upstream so that we talk about families and marriages so that you don't have kids who are
Alone. Displaced.
who need a home.
Yeah.
So, but the government, as much as it wants to, can't solve this problem. This is a church problem, and I'm embarrassed to say that I read in the paper Sunday where Margie Quinn was excited that faith groups had stepped up and have helped ease this problem and solve this problem. Great, and that's great news. My question is, when did we step down?
Yeah.
And why did we step down? And that we now have to step up to solve the problem. So I think if we're bold and say things like, hey, we'll provide, put a number off the top of my head, 10,000 homes that are ready at any minute. So any child that's brought to a DCS office and needs a home, make one phone call and we'll have that child a home. Can we develop a residential center where we take level 3 and level 4 kids, what they call level 3, level 4. These are kids that are so traumatized, so hurt, so wounded, so angry that they're not ready to be in a family yet. So can we build a facility to house these kids, and then put around them? One of the more successful works in the entire state is a thing called Men of Valor, where they assign guys in prison mentors and friends who will do Bible study with them and help them transition once they get out of prison. There's no reason in the world we could not have that kind of ministry to these young people who are so hurt and who have to be taught again what love looks like and what real love is, because that has been so messed up in their lives. I got a little of this when I started doing Kairos a bunch of years ago, and I would talk that God loves you like a father, and it would lock up half of Kairos because they had been traumatized by their dads. And for them to pray Our Father we had to stop and talk about that.
I appreciate the heart behind it, because I think it goes back to Peter and John. Like, Peter and John got the worst news about the world, right? They've been arrested. Everything's bad.
Yeah.
What would you say? The world, you said in your sermon, the world hasn't gotten worse. It hasn't gotten better. It's the same.
It is.
How do we get Peter and John's heartbeat of boldness to chase down issues as such that we're talking about? Where did the boldness come from? How do we develop that as believers?
It comes from the encounter with the risen Christ. When you understand that the risen Christ is bigger than Caesar, and the risen Christ is bigger than Pontius Pilate. It's what Jesus said to Pilate: "You don't have any authority, except." And for us as a church to be afraid that somebody's going to do something comes from a very weak understanding of Jesus and a very lazy worship and encounter of worship that doesn't demand everything from you and then demand that you recognize who Jesus is.
That's good. So yesterday, we always end with this question. Is there anything from your sermon that you had to cut or you wish you were able to say?
Well, I kind of, you give an easy with this because I snuck it in anyway.
Oh, okay.
Remember when the Peter and John came back and they started praying and said, "You made heaven and earth." Okay, now they've just been in front of the court, who has told them, "We own you. We are in power over you. We will beat you. We will throw you in jail, and ultimately we will kill you." And they come back and reaffirm that it is God who made the world, not the court. So my question is, and what I'd love to preach on is, who makes your world?
So you did say that, yeah.
Who makes your world? Who is it that defines reality for you?
That's good.
I think that's a good sermon.
That's a good sermon.
Yeah.
That's great.
You, in your prayer before you opened, and we'll close it up, but before you opened yesterday, you said this, quote, "Let's get to the point where we're not depressed by the shape of the world, but overwhelmed by the glory of who you are." And I just wrote down, as you said that, how do I get to that heartbeat where it's a consistent heartbeat? And I think you said it. I think we have to get alone with the risen Christ.
Well, and yeah, you do. And you have to do some crazy things like turn off social media, turn off television, create the space and the silence where you can have that kind of deep, life-changing and life-affirming worship. The world wants you distracted with nothingness. And they want you worried about things that do not ultimately matter. I tell people all the time, I'm the guy who's in the room when the doctor has left and the family's gone home, and it's just me and the patient who's heard the news. They're not going to make it. There's nothing more science can do. Not one of them tells me about how many followers they had on Twitter or how much money they made. And yet, from the way that people talk, man, that's the only thing that matters now. And it's not. And you don't find that out until you're alone with Jesus in that deep kind of soul-transforming worship.
Yes, sir.
That sometimes happens Sunday at 11, but needs to happen every day.
Yep.
In some kind of way.
Yeah. May that be said of us as we get closer to Easter.
Amen.
As we walk this road of Lent, and as we look at things that we may need to carve out so that Jesus can rightfully have his place in those parts of our souls. Mike, thanks for coming.
Oh, always.
Thanks for jumping
Thank you,
in.
guys.
Thanks for the conversation. We look forward to next week, and we'll go from there. If you're watching there, hit that subscribe button as we talk about. Join us on this journey. We would sure love to have you. Thanks for joining our podcast with sermon notes, and we will see you next week.